When you've played or followed Star Rail long enough, you'll slowly get used to the habit of pre-farming for upcoming characters that you're gonna want to pull, or just to have a supply of materials in hand to use at any time. But maybe there are those times where you'd sit there and think to yourself, what am I supposed to farm first? Would it be talents, boss mats, enemy drop, or even cash, since your broke ass somehow spent it all on things you can't even remember? Well, in this video, I'll show you the way I usually do things, and if you're as much as an overthinker as I am, then maybe you'll be able to get some pointers from all the steps that I'll be doing. Let's look at the art of pre-farming. The name's Leafy, and this is Casual Guides to Games, Star Rail Edition. So first things first, you have the blatantly obvious path of choosing what to farm whatever it is that you're lacking for a character that you want to pull. This is, of course, a situation that you will always encounter when you're prepping for a rerun character, where all the prior information about said character is already there for you to see in the game itself. Since you'll be sure of what you need and you can just farm it without hesitation, and you might even already have some at your disposal. The tricky part comes when there are new characters coming. Oftentimes, you'll be unsure of what exactly it is that you need to build those characters, and that's where a bit of research will need to come into play. Websites like Honey Hunter provides you with early access information of what upcoming characters will need, and from there you can begin your journey of finally pre-farming the materials. Now, there are 3 materials in general that you will need to outright identify in the case of going for a character. One being boss materials, the other being talent, and the last one being weekly boss material. There's actually one more type of material that you might want to look out for, which I call common enhancement materials, but we'll get to that later. What you need to decide now is the order in which you want to farm these materials. My personal suggestion would be to get the boss materials done and over with first, simply because the drops of those ones are not affected by RNG when you can complete its maximum difficulty. They will always strictly give you 5 of those bad boys, which means that you can always do a set amount of runs and it will give you the same amount of drops. For a 4-star character, you will need 50 of those boss materials, which you can net in 10 runs of the specific Stagnant Shadows boss. While for a 5-star, you will need 65 of those, which you can net in 13 runs instead. Respectively, 10 runs will cost you 300 Trailblaze power, while 13 will cost you 390, so keep those stamina costs in mind when you plan for your next week of farming. The next one I would begin collecting would be the weekly boss materials. However, since these things are gated at only 3 attempts per week, it's best if you use all 3 attempts of the week on the boss that you require the materials from. My general rule of thumb is that I always keep around 20 to 30 of each weekly boss drops, just in case I need to max out traces of characters I suddenly want to build. You don't have to follow those numbers per se, but that's just the value that has kept me comfortably ahead of my need for weekly boss materials, so feel free to have your own target. Now, there's a reason why I save talent mats for last, because they are the ones that really depend on how much you think would be enough to satisfy your needs, and this wildly varies between people. While some would just straight up gun for the amount you just about need to max out all of a character's traces, which normally equates to 18 greens, 69
nice
blues, and 139 purples, which equates to 417 blues, by the way. Some people, myself included, would just brainlessly farm these things until it looks like you'll have enough. And while most people would view this as a waste of stamina, I see this as a way to not only be prepared for the character that I want to pull, but also for other characters that might be coming in the future. A big example is back to my time when I farmed for Jingliu. I farmed an insane amount of mats for her because I wanted to max her out completely. And yeah, I was able to comfortably max out all of her traces while also having an extremely healthy amount of leftovers. Up to the point where you can probably barely call them leftovers. Initially, I was going to use this to finally build my Clara, but I kept holding back because I wasn't entirely sure if I had a comp to use for her. Eventually, I spent a couple of pulls on Cooler Daniel's banner and he decided to grace me with his presence. So now, I have a free path to at least building him to a usable level without having to spend anything on talent mats. Normally, I try to keep about 300 of the blues and green types of these talent mats, and this is normally more than enough to both be used and be saved. You can even try and craft a bunch of the blue ones to those purple ones and then farm the blue ones back up to 300. I did that for a good while with the harmony mats, and now I have more than enough to have already maxed out my Bronya and even begin maxing out Asta, Yukong, and Tingyun. But that was just because I like to hoard stuff, so don't take this part as financial advice. Going back to the start of this section, I did mention that there is another type of material to consider, which are the common enhancement materials. These are mats that you get rather passively through battling overworld enemies and completing various domains. Normally, you wouldn't really think about these materials because, like I said, you get them rather passively, but it never hurts to try and optimize getting the ones that you need. This is where the assignments tabs come in, and I can't stress how important it is to properly cycle through these if you want to actually stay ahead in terms of materials. Cycling through these assignments every now and then will be beneficial to making sure that you won't ever need to think about dedicating a section of your time to farm for these materials. Keeping track of how much of these mats and then switching them once you've thought that you have enough will go a long way to making sure that you're not going to run out of them once you start upgrading. My recommended number is to keep 3,000 of these green level items. And you might say, wait, that's quite a lot. But trust me, once you've played this game for long, you'll soon realize that these things build up on the fast lane. I also recommend to keep that much because, like I said, I count them as common materials because you use them in everything that you're upgrading. Traces? Yeah. Ascension, that's where you'll probably first see them. Litecoin upgrades? You bet. And throughout each of these aspects, you'd find yourself using them quite often. But don't worry, they also drop plentifully in simulated universe runs and overworld chests. So you don't really need to worry about running out of them regardless of how much you use them as long as you regularly do the game's content. You can also use assignments as a means to keep a steady stream of credits lining up your wallet. Alright, sure, 18,000 credits may not seem like a lot to get in a day, but letting it accumulate over a long while will build you a decent bank soon enough. And of course, after settling the matters of your materials, it's time for you to get to farming the relics. And the reason why I put them as last is due to the fact that there is absolutely no way for you to guarantee getting anything good other than to spend your self-modeling resins, and even that can only guarantee you good main stats. Spend your stamina on relics after you've gathered enough of the actual talent and ascension materials, so that you don't have to worry about the cost of ascending and maxing out your new character while you can just slave away at relic domains. Like many people have said regarding gachas, relics are the endgame, because all you'll be doing later on is trying to improve your relics by mere percentages one step at a time. And of course, after you decide that you want to farm relics, you need to decide which relics to farm. And there is actually a trick that you can also employ that would help you figure out what type of relics to farm for certain upcoming characters. Here's what I mean. There are certain times, not all the time, but certain times where Star Rail would release new relic domains with relics that doesn't really quite have any direct use for the existing characters. Those types of domains usually means that whoever is going to be announced next would more than likely be using those relics as their best in slots. Take for example, Acheron. Her best in slot relic, the Pioneer set, has been in the game since the beginning of 2.0, and it is clearly the relic set that is meant to be used alongside her kit. With this trick in mind, you won't have to go around researching through other guides or websites to find out which relic would be best for your upcoming characters. Now, you might be asking, but what about the relics that are going to be released with the characters that need them? I mentioned in a short ones that 2.1's new planner sets, the Izumo and Sigonian, will be the best ones for Acheron. But you can't farm those ones right now, can you? That is where salvaging your trash relics and saving those relic fragments will come in handy. With the new immediate trashing feature, you can easily discard the ones that you just got that you don't want to keep and farm conveniently from then on. While yes, you might be tempted to keep using those relic fragments to craft other relics that you might need for your existing characters, but you're better off keeping a healthy amount of your relic remains in order to craft the newly released sets, right off the bat. This way, you can at least gain the effects of the planner set while you then begin actually farming those sets for better main and substats once the version gets released. Of course, this way of doing things can also be applied to newly released relic sets as well. Actually, this way of doing things can also be used for talent and boss materials, since the Omni Synthesizer now allows you to switch any two materials with one another. You can always try to make up the amount of time you would lose waiting for the new materials to come out by farming a bit more of the older materials and then switching them out once the new ones get released. This is what I did when the Penacony announcement came with new Nihility materials for Black Swan and Acheron. I've been doing a lot of Nihility pre-farming before that, so you know what, I decided to just double down on my Nihility farming and promptly switched out the old ones for the new ones. Of course, you can always buy these materials from the Embers Exchange at the store, but only do that when you really have to, or else you're better off just saving those Undying Embers for the monthly pulls, especially if you don't get to pull that often. Apart from all that, you just need to worry about level books and light cone experience, all of which are pretty easily farmed if you consistently do events, complete quests, and do random roll objectives. The free battle pass also helps with accumulating these materials. Plus, if you've ever felt like you've pre-farmed enough of the other materials that I've mentioned, then feel free to spend some stamina on these calyxes. The weeks before a patch comes are usually accompanied by a double calyx drop events anyway, so farming them then would bring much more value compared to farming them before that. And there you go. That is the art of pre-farming in Honkai Star Rail. At least the general gist of it. Feel free to fine-tune any part of this process to your liking. That way you can find a way to farm that is truly comfortable for your own time and experience. Because, like I said, the numbers I put in here are just suggestions that I came up with through my own experience in the game. That, and I do have a bit of a hoarding problem, so don't feel the need to farm as extensively as I do. With that said, I hope you guys have found this video to be helpful. Do leave a like if you enjoyed and a dislike if you don't, and thanks for making it this far in. Hope you all have a good time farming and prepping for your characters, and good luck to those who are either pulling for Acheron or Aventurine come this new patch. Thanks for watching, my name is Leafy and I'll see you next time. Sayonara.